And now we're going to talk about the changes that are coming to the NCCI experience mod. And my remote isn't working, so I'm going to have to kind of manipulate some of my setup up here to make the slides work. I apologize for that. I've sent out a couple of emails about the new split point, and I think maybe it's important that I remind everyone or tell everyone what the split point is. The split point is the first $5,000 of every claim. In California, it's $7,000. In Pennsylvania, it's totally different. But this split point is the first X number of dollars in NCCI, which is really what we're going to talk about today. This is a point where 100% of all of the dollars count 100% on the experience mod. This number at $5,000 in NCCI has been the same since 1991. And they are proposing a change effective in 2013, beginning in 2013, that I feel presents one of the greatest opportunities that we've seen in our 10 years for you to just be so far ahead of everyone in your marketing area. And I've said to several people that if you think about how far ahead of your competition you are when it comes to your understanding of the experience mod today, and the experience mod has not changed in any meaningful way for 20 years. So now that something really substantial is going to change, think about how much bigger that advantage becomes. And what we're going to talk about today is what we know about these changes. We'll talk a little bit about what we don't know. We're going to talk about what I feel are some misconceptions that are out there about what this change means and how you can leverage this into writing more business. So what we know is that the split point's been where it is now since 1991. And it is going to change to $10,000 in 2013. It's going to change to $13,500 in 2014, and they're estimating that it's going to change to $15,000 in 2015. Now, the reason that this is estimated is that beginning in 2015, they are going to start indexing the primary loss split point based on the national average cost per claim. Now, when NCCI says national average, what they mean is the average of all of the states they provide rate-making services for. So this is not going to consider California. It's not going to consider any of the monopolistic states. But they work with most of the other states, even the independent bureau states. And so that $15,000 is just an estimate today. And perhaps most importantly, this primary loss split point is going to change every year. There is no more parking it in one place and waiting for 20 years to see if it needs to be changed. This is going to be changing every single year, and that introduces a pretty cool opportunity because this isn't going to change on January 1, 2013 for everyone. And a reasonable question to ask would be, why not? And the reason why not is that not every state files their rates on January 1. This is going to take place on the regularly scheduled filing date. So, as an example, North Carolina files their rates on April 1. That's when new expected loss rates and everything come into effect. Kentucky files theirs on September 1. So, if you have a June 1, 2013 experience mod, that mod has Kentucky and North Carolina on it, then the North Carolina split point is going to be $10,000 and the Kentucky split point is going to be $5,000. And the year after that, North Carolina is going to be $13,500 and Kentucky is going to be $10,000. And this is an ongoing thing as they change this split point every single year on multi-state mods, depending on when the states file their rates, et cetera, you could have very easily different states with different split points. And it creates a strong opportunity for confusion, and confusion is good when we can bring clarity to our clients. Any questions about this part or what we've talked about up to now? Yes.
Why do they call it proposed?
Why do they call what proposed?
The change, you were saying it's a proposed change. I thought it was pretty much a done deal.
Nothing is official yet. And everything, every year that there are new rates, the NCCI proposes them and the state approves them. Now, the historical precedent suggests that if the state is paying NCCI a lot of money, which they are, to provide rate-making services, they don't typically argue with these things. The only historical precedent we really have in recent years is in 2009, NCCI proposed a new rate-making methodology, which they made a very big deal of, but really didn't change very much, practically speaking. And all of the states that NCCI worked with immediately rubber-stamped this change, with the exception of Texas, which rubber-stamped it after a year of arguing with NCCI. We do not know yet, because NCCI hasn't made their first filings on this yet. Because the first filings are going to be the January 1, 2013 effective date filings, which are going to come April, May, June of 2012. Now, they may publish them early. They may submit them early, so there's chance for discussion. I can't tell you today with 100% certainty that this is going to be approved everywhere, but it's a reasonable assumption based on past history, and I think based on the logic that's behind this move. Now, why is it changing? This is a graph from NCCI of the average cost per claim since 1988. In 1991, which is right here, the average cost per claim was just a tick over $3,000, and they're projecting it in 2011 to be very nearly $9,000. So in that 20-year span, the average cost per claim has very nearly tripled. Yet the primary loss split point has stayed the same, which doesn't make any logical sense. So this is why it's changing. Why it took them 20 years to get around to this, I don't really know. And the end result of this change is that the mod is going to be more responsive. And what that means is that mods are going to be able to go lower than they're going today. Your minimum mods are going to decrease. But when you have losses, it's going to move. The number of mod points that a particular claim impacts the mod is going to be greater. We were talking about this yesterday in the Level 5 meeting, and someone said, it's really muted the effect of claims, good or bad. The mod hasn't been swinging as much as it really should. And that's the idea behind this change. So what is the impact going to be? We don't know what the impact's going to be when we get to 15,000, although we're going to talk about some scenarios about that. But this is a graph from NCCI on their anticipation of the first year change, when the split point goes to $1,000. And this is based only on single state risks. But their estimate is you've got 36% going plus or minus 2 points, 38% -2 to -5, and then 14 18% are going to go +2 to more than 11, and then you got 8% that are dropping between 5 and 10. And this graph is in your handout. That's not in your handout. Okay, I'm sorry. And someone asked me at a break, if it's not the first page in your handout, then it's not in your handout. Someone asked me at the break, when these recordings are posted online, any supplemental materials we've had up here are also going to be posted, so you'll hear about those. I think the examples that we walk through are going to illustrate why the mod is going to move this way, and if it doesn't, then we'll come back to it and we'll talk about it some more. So what does this mean? And the answer to what it means is not very complicated. What it means is that this is how things are going to change. There's no deeper meaning than that. They're going to make this change. This is what they estimate the impact to be. Now, you may have a lot more clients in the 7% than you have in the 36%. And I'm going to try to give you a way to think about how you might determine that. But the reality is that we don't know what the answers to all of this is yet. So these next few case studies were inspired by a blog post that Randy Boss sent to me. He didn't write it. It was actually written by NAIS or NIAS or whoever it is. And I read the blog post, and a lot of it was factual information reiterating what NCCI had said, which was really good. And then they said, alert, alert, we've run some analysis on mods that we have, and this is going to be really bad. And they had 3 or 4 different examples, everything from a really high mod to a mod that was in the 90s, and all of them were going up 10 or more points. And I said, that just can't be right. Because what is the average mod? 1. Always and forever, amen, the average mod is 1. And this change does not affect that truth. What it does is it allows the mod to be more flexible while circling around that average. So I knew that it was not possible that they pulled 4 mods out of a hat of all varying shapes and sizes and that all of them went up. So I started thinking about it. I thought, well, how could you estimate what the impact of this change would be? And there's a couple of different ways to look at it. Now, here's an 88 mod. This is an actual mod worksheet I had on my desk. 0.88, relatively small risk. They have an 11% weighting value. They're in Missouri. And I took their actual losses. I didn't include the whole mod worksheet here because we don't need to talk about all that. You just need to believe me when I say that I took their actual losses and I adjusted as if the split point were $15,000. I decreased their excess losses accordingly. Their mod went to 97. Right? It's time to panic, right? It's a really good mod going up to an absurdly high level for the actual losses. But I encourage you, whoa, I didn't expect that. I encourage you not to panic, because what did I miss in that analysis? I increased the split point and I recalculated it based on their actual losses. But what was missing from that analysis? What's that? Well, you probably have a change in the weighting value, although I didn't ultimately adjust for that because it's just too big a variable. What I didn't, the very basic thing I didn't adjust for is the expected primary losses. I didn't adjust the D ratio. If we're going to triple the amount of actual primary losses that are counted, the D ratio is going to have to change. I don't know exactly how much, but I just took a simple number because I'm a simple person, and I said, if the actual primary loss is going to triple, let's triple the expected primary loss. Now, there are other rating values that are going to change. The weighting values may change. The ballast factors are almost certainly going to change. All of those things may change. But what if I just change the expected primary losses and I triple the D ratio? So now it's gone from an 88 to a 78. It dropped by 10 points instead of going up by 9. It's a pretty substantial difference. And in my view, the analysis that was done by NAIS, and I hate to call them out because it's not like the whole organization wrote this blog post. It was one person. But I feel like it's going to be symptomatic of what we're going to see as they talk about this change is there's going to be a lot of knee-jerk overreaction to how this is a bad idea. And I think logically the idea makes a whole lot of sense. The problem that we have now is that there's fear because we don't know. There's uncertainty about exactly how things are going to change. And what I'm hoping to be able to impart in our conversation today is not that I know exactly what's going to change, because all I know is what's been proposed, but that we can make some reasonable assumptions about what this is going to look like so we can start to guide our clients and our prospects in the right direction. So we can applaud that the mod is actually going to go down by 10 points in that spot. So let's look at another example. Here's a 123 mod. Now this is a very small employer. Their weighting value is only 7%, and they've got a 123 mod. Not good at all. When I adjusted their expected or their actual primary losses, their primary losses jumped from 25,000 or from 10,000 to 25,000, and their mod went to 156. And I don't have a sound effect for that, but it would probably sound like a gun going off for this employer. It would not be good. It would not be good at all. And that if we adjust the expected primary losses, the mod still goes up. It goes up to 136, but it doesn't go up by 30 points like it did if we only adjust the actual primary losses. And this is demonstrating what I said before. The losses are going to impact the mod more. The mod is going to move when things get bad more quickly, and it's going to improve when things get good more quickly than it ever has before. So let's look at something a little bit closer to 1.0. Here's a 1.02 mod. They've got a little bit more in actual primary loss than they had expected, but they have quite a bit less in rateable excess, and they wind up with a 102 experience mod. If we only adjust the actual primary losses, we triple the split point, their mod goes up 14 points to 116. But if we triple the expected primary loss, it goes up, or it goes down, to a 94. It goes down 9 points. And so, here is a situation where someone that had a debit mod now has a really good credit mod. And yesterday when we talked about this, I recalculated the minimum mod for this account. The minimum mod went down like 14 or 16 points if you rerun these numbers. Let's talk about that. Since Preston mentioned it, I want to tell you. On an NCCI worksheet, and there is a document on the certified site about how to calculate the minimum mod, and I've got the rating value, I've got the rating section for every single type of mod worksheet that I know of. If you look at that document and I'm missing one, send it to me. But I walk you through how to calculate the minimum mod by hand for each of those rating bureaus. But for NCCI, you divide the stabilizing value by the total of the expected line, and that will give you the minimum mod. So you divide the stabilizing value by box K on an NCCI mod worksheet, and that's going to give you the minimum mod. And if you want to talk more about why that gives you the minimum mod, we can certainly do that later on. So what does all of this stuff mean? It still means the exact same thing it meant before we walk through these examples. This is what we know about what NCCI projects the first year change will be. Now, why can they only project this? Well, they don't have all the information. Because these mods that are going to be promulgated in 2013, the first policies that are going to be included on those 2013 mods still don't expire for another 2 months. And as someone said very astutely yesterday, your employers, if they've got a January 1 effective date, they only have 2 more months to decide what their 2013 mod's going to be. Now, that's not entirely true because you've got time between now and the valuation date, but any claims that could happen between now and then, this is your chance to control them. There is a little bit more concrete information about what this means, and I've kind of rolled around on this indirectly. The best mods are going to get better. Minimum mods will drop. The worst mods are going to get worse. Some of them really substantially worse depending on what the loss profile is. If you've got someone with a 150 mod, but all of their losses are $200,000, their mod isn't going to get that much worse. But if they've got a bunch of claims in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, where you're really taking a big chunk of that loss and moving it from excess into primary, they could just get smacked really, really hard. Most mods aren't going to change that much from where they would have been before, because NCCI has been playing with the rating values, trying to account for all of these changes in the average cost per claim. They've been trying to keep the formula working, and I think what they finally figured out was that they couldn't change the rating values anymore to make the formula work the way they wanted, so it forced their hand into this change. And this last thing nothing's changed here. The best agents are going to get the business. And our opportunity today is that there's going to be so much misinformation about this. Carl talked about earlier large sophisticated employers he deals with who still don't know what the ERA is. The ERA has been effective in Nebraska for 13 years now. For 13 years, and they don't know the benefit of returning people to work. So now that we're in a situation where something really substantial is going to change, either people aren't going to know, and there's definitely power in them knowing, or they're going to be misinformed, and being able to clarify this for them and explain how it affects them. And I can walk you through, if we can talk about tonight or we can talk about when we all get home, about the methodology I use to work through these case studies. I can't tell you that any of that's accurate, because I just made some assumptions about how the rating values are going to change. But I think those assumptions are reasonable to kind of gauge how things are going to move around so that we don't panic. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. And I can use the word generation because it's been 20 years since this has changed the last time. And for those of you expecting to still be in the business in 2018, 2019, 2020, one of the things that NCCI said, or their actuary who spoke about this change said, is that after they get to the $15,000 split point, they're looking at completely rewriting the experience rating plan and replacing the notion of primary and excess losses and considering it a different way and trying to simplify the formula sum, which is going to open up an even bigger door of opportunity. I don't know anything about what they're actually going to do, but that's something to be looking out for, and we will obviously keep you up to date. We don't know what the rating values are going to be. We don't know how the D ratios are going to change. Are the expected loss rates going to change substantially because of these numbers? We don't know how weighting values and ballasts are going to change. If they're going to have less expected losses, are they going to count them more, and so weighting values are going to go up? I really have no idea, but as soon as we find out when these first rate filings come out, you'll know as soon as we do. The different split points on multi-state mods that I talked about prior, at the very beginning today. If you have a multi-state mod and these states have different filing dates, you are going to always, as long as they change the split point every year, and they say they're going to index it based on the average cost per claim, there is certainly the possibility that if the average cost per claim doesn't change that much from year to year, the split point may not change. But the likelihood is that this split point is going to change every single year from 2013 until they get rid of the concept of a split point. And on those multi-state mods, you could have a different split point every single year on those mods, and it's going to add confusion for employers. We are going to keep you updated on this. My feelings were a little bit hurt when I sent out a couple of emails about this, and then the next week I got an email from someone who had received both of those messages saying, hey, have you heard about this new NCCI split point? So I know how many of you read my emails and know that it's personally hurtful to me, that it's not 100%. I sit at my computer and cry, but my self-esteem issues aren't your problem. Mod impact is going to be updated with all of this information. The split point always and forever has been $5,000 for everyone, and now it's going to need to be indexed by date, but that is obviously going to be part of the software well ahead of the release of these new numbers. And if you, we can certainly talk later about the math, but if you're sitting there saying, I hear what Kevin is saying about how these are going to change, and I kind of know what he's talking about, but I don't understand how the math works or why those things would change or how they impact the calculation. That is a big part of what we talk about at the Master WorkComp Advisor course. And I'm not here to sell the Master's course, but you should buy it. When we're going to be in Vegas the first week of December. I was talking to, who was I talking to? It wasn't Bobby. I was talking to someone who's been to the Master's course, and I said, and I believe this strongly, that the purpose of coming to the Master's course and learning more about the mod is not so that you can calculate the cost of a claim by hand, although it's a neat party trick. I mean, you should see, like you're at a cocktail party, you'll just have the whole group around you. Yes. But the reason to learn more about the mod is so that once you understand how the math works, then it becomes so much easier to communicate clearly to someone that you don't want to explain to them how the math works. It's really, it was an enlightening experience for me as I learned about it and got better and better at analyzing and understanding how the parts work, and it's a really fun class. We take 16 Macs, and we work through a lot of case studies. There's a lot of group work where you're working on things together. And I don't want to dissuade you from taking the class, but the exam is a 13-question essay test. No.
I have just a general question. I mean, the fact of the matter is we all know that it's severity driving a lot of the claims, not so much frequency anymore. And the fact that healthcare costs have risen not due to procedures but due to technology at a rate of 10%. And we know that NCCI and the carriers all work in one group together. So, what are some outside sources doing to address some of these issues that really, when you look at these split points, the benefactor is going to be the carrier all the way around with increased mods?
Well, you see, and I guess that's really the biggest. If you leave here thinking that, then I haven't done my job, because the mods for people with bad mods are going to go up, but the opportunity for employers who prevent claims by hiring the right people and taking safety seriously, and then when they do have injuries, do the right things by getting people back to work quickly, even if it's on a modified duty basis, getting them to the right doctor, doing the right treatment. Those employers have an even bigger advantage than they have today, because their minimum mod is going to be substantially lower than it is today. And from a mathematical standpoint, it's hard to argue with the logic that if the split point was $5,000 in 1991 when the average cost per claim was $3,000, that the split point can't be $5,000 today when the average cost per claim is $9,000. It can't be. It doesn't make any sense that that would be true. So it is true that NCCI is largely owned by the carriers. That is true. And I don't believe that NCCI has any incentive to act in the interest of employers. At the same time, I do believe that their actuaries are intellectually honest. And I haven't seen anything either in my study of what the impact of this will be, or in anything that's been said. And obviously NCCI wouldn't come out and say, man, the carriers aren't getting enough premium, so we're going to go screw employers and do this deal. They wouldn't say that. But I really feel like this is a change driven by necessity. The math says it has to change. And the reality is it probably should have changed 10 years ago when the average cost per claim was $5,000 or $6,000. Steve.
Yeah, I hear what you say and agree with the logic on this one change. It'll be interesting, because in Pennsylvania, where maybe they can't get legislative approval for increases in rates, there's been times when the PCRB has actually changed credibility factors or some of the tables that drive the mod, which causes a veiled sort of rate increase that's really hidden and hard to actually dissect. So, in the scenario where you equal the tripling of the expected loss factors equal to what you're doing with the split point, if they do that, it'll make sense that they're what you're saying. But if they just put a point or two below that, they may be giving themselves a little bit of an advantage that.
Right, but the average mod still has to be a 1.0. Now, what happened in Massachusetts is a perfect example of what you're talking about, because in most states there's an ARAP, and it's an assigned risk surcharge. If you're in the assigned risk, this is how much more you're going to pay because you're in the assigned risk. In Massachusetts, that is an all-risk program. So you have an ARAP that has a minimum value of 1.0 and a maximum value of 125 that is applied after the experience mod is applied. And my understanding, based on a conversation with some folks at Heather's agency, is that change was made in the exact scenario that you're talking about, where they couldn't get a rate increase through, so they said, we'll just stick this extra, it's like a second experience mod, but it can never be a credit. So the best you can ever do is not have to pay the surcharge, and it counts. It is more of a severity issue in that it counts more lost dollars in the calculation. So it is true that the employers where the rates maybe aren't keeping up with what they're costing. So if I've got in the example where there's a 123 mod, and it went up to 133 or 136, that is a situation where you could make the argument that by changing the split point, what you're actually doing is allowing the experience mod to more accurately charge what the risk should cost, because you're more accurately charging based on their losses. So is that a veiled rate increase? I don't know. It is for those people. But for the employers whose mods aren't as low as they should be, then it's going to work the other way, because the average mod is still going to have to come to a 1. The average mod has to come to a 1.0, and that's not going to change. It is definitely going to punish people whose mods haven't been as high as they probably logically should be, and the cost of claims is going to go up because of that. And Pat's got a question right here.
Kevin, are you trying to understand are you saying that if it was on a bell curve, and we're on a bell curve now, that when they make the change, the bell curve still, the people in the middle of the bell curve is going to stay the same, but the people on the ends of the bell curve, the bad end and the good end, it's going to get sharper.
Right.
So, I guess to everyone's point, and back to 1.0 is still going to be 1.0, and most people are still going to be right around 1, plus or minus a little bit. The people on the good end of 1 are going to get really good, and the people on the bad end are going to get really bad.
Right.
Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly. The edges of that curve are going to stretch out. Yep, we got microphone coming around to.
Did you imply that the frequency is going to hurt the mod more than severity? Because you were mentioning if you have one large claim, won't affect your mod as much as if you're having a bunch of smaller claims. Are we to take that away from this?
Well, that has always been the case, but what is a small claim is now going to change. Today, if I have $4,000 or $5,000 claims, that is going to impact my mod more severely than one $20,000 claim, because the first $5,000 of every claim is primary. So you've got $5,000 primary, $15,000 in excess. When this change happens, what is now frequency is a $15,000 claim. Now, with the average cost per claim of $9,000, then that makes sense. But so you've got now the example becomes, if you have 4 $15,000 claims, that hurts your mod way more than one $60,000 claim. And so I think what I was trying to get at is that if you're looking at these examples that I gave, I adjusted the actual losses based on the losses that were on the mod. So this is not to say that every mod that's a 102 is going to drop to a 94. It's going to depend completely on what the actual losses are, and I didn't want to complicate things by trying to talk about those exact numbers. But for someone, if you've got an employer that has a 110 mod, and that 110 mod is largely because of one $150,000 claim, that 110 mod is going to, it may go down, but it's going to move less than someone that has $110,000 worth of $20,000 claims. That mod is going to likely move up. So it really depends on what the profile of the losses is, and the frequency counts more than severity is true as far as it goes. Although I still have the argument with some people that there is no number for frequency on the mod. And there are some people who truly believe that if you have $101 claims, that's going to hurt your mod more than one $100 claim, which isn't true. But what is considered frequency, that definition of a frequency claim is going to change with this change.
So the software like ModMaster, are you suggesting that we have that's going to be programmed ahead of time so we can kind of give a forecast to our clients, hey, this is what's changing this coming next year, this is what's changing in the future? Are they going to do you think these software vendors are going to have this programmed in so we can show clients what's going to be happening to them?
When those rating values are published. Right. And that's not yet.
Kevin?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is not really a question, but more of an observation. I'm not sure about every state, but in Tennessee, carriers can put scheduled credits or debits on an account 25 points either way. And I'm sitting here looking at all this and anticipating how a carrier is going to react to these changes. And I think I know carriers well enough to know that the accounts that have higher mods that go even higher are typically the accounts that have debits on them. And I don't see a carrier reacting to a 10-point increase in mod with a reduction in the debits. I don't think carriers are going to do that. On the other end, the accounts that have scheduled credits on them, when their mods drop 10 more points, I think the reaction of most carriers is going to be, well, this is the same account that we had before. There's really been nothing changed, and so we're going to back the credit off so that there's pretty much a wash in premium. And I guess the observation that I'm making is I don't know that the good accounts are going to benefit that much from this. And I'll just throw it out there to see if anybody else has an opinion.
Well, it's an interesting point. And another related point is that people have carriers that have pretty much a hard mod underwriting limit. If your mod is above X, we aren't going to write it, or something in that neighborhood. So, that 125 account that they wrote happily this year is now a 135 account and is outside of their threshold. And how long is it going to take them to adjust those expectations or those internal underwriting thresholds? Because I don't think it's going to happen ahead of this change. It's going to be a reactive thing. And when you combine that with I forgot what I was going to say. So, Rich.
In California, this point changed from 2,000 to 7,000 a couple of years ago. So don't you think it'll be very similar to what happened there?
What happened there?
I would say what happened is pretty much what you said. And the only thing else I would add would be small employers that had one claim that didn't have a lot of payroll. It impacted them the most. And you could see double-digit increases in their mod if they had one claim a couple years old and they switched from the prior plan to the new plan.
And in California, the change is a little bit different because in California, it was the first 2,000 of every claim was primary, and then over that was primary based on this ridiculously complex, truly the most complex formula I've seen in calculating workers' compensation numbers was calculating primary losses in California, where there was no cap on primary losses until the claim got above the claim cap, which is $175,000. And they went from that very confusing formula where every claim on the mod that was over $2,000 would have a different primary loss amount to a flat the first 7,000 of every claim. So I would think, and I don't know, but I would think that when they made that change, the impact globally wasn't quite as large because you had primary losses above $2,000 being counted on so many of those claims. What I do think has the potential to happen, and I was talking to David Lang about this yesterday, when Pennsylvania changed how they don't have primary losses, but when they changed their mod, it created a situation where the mod could move very, very quickly. And what they ultimately wound up instituting was a hard cap where the mod cannot move more than 25% from year to year, with the exception being that if that 25% move would take them below a 1.0, that it moves all the way down to a 1. And so one thing, and I have no reason to believe this is going to happen, but one thing that I think there's a real danger of happening if there is any sort of political backlash to this decision is that you could wind up with even more state fragmentation of rules where one state might institute a mod cap or one state might might change the rules in a certain way based on how their legislature feels like it should be done. And it has the potential to create an even more confusing environment when you're talking about how the plan works on multi-state risks, but that I don't know how likely that is. Tim?
Two thoughts and questions. Number one is to what the gentleman said over here was, when you talk to underwriters, it's already a slight battle because they're going to tell you they have to maintain integrity when rates are going down in certain class codes. They have to have that premium on a large account. And I think that's something that, you need to stay in touch with the underwriter, is that as that mod drops and those credits reduce, or they actually keep they start debiting an account because they say, well, we've got to maintain the integrity of the premium. And that's a fight that you may have to battle. The other thing is, as this comes into effect with larger accounts, I'm curious about large deductible. People will maybe start going to larger deductibles, and self-insuring the first part of it, and to coincide with the increase on it.
It's an interesting question, and I think all signs are pointing to indicate that by the time this change is made, the rate environment is going to have changed. Surpluses are going away really quickly because of the catastrophic property claims that are being had. There was already an upward pressure on rates. It's going to be very, very difficult in states to get regulatory approval for higher rates until the economy turns around. But something is going to have to give, and that something could be that underwriters start underwriting again instead of just clicking the yes button every time something hits their inbox. But if the rates firm at the same time that you have high mod risks coming in, it could create a real problem. And when the rates firm and rates start to go up, that is typically when people start to examine alternate financing options. And so high deductibles or captives or whatever start to become much more attractive options for those employers. So this could tip the scale a little bit more in that direction for sure. Greg?
Well, I'd have to agree with both of them. And that was my concern, is how the reinsurance folks going to react to this, because most of them are going to have their guidelines with what sort of mods that they want to accept and take. And I guess to me, I just look at it as going to be great for the state risk pools. And I guess the other question would be is why aren't they giving more of the underwriters or the carriers the opportunity to do things like consent to rate filings, or to basically be able to write the risk to what they feel that the premium should be?
Well, in some states you can do that, and I feel like I'm standing up here defending the NCCI, and I think the biggest thing is that I look at this with different eyes than many of you do. I mean, what I see, for better or worse, is a logical adjustment to the experience rating plan. And to Steve's point, if NCCI doesn't adjust the rating values the way we expect, then it could wind up being a hard thing for some employers. But the bigger point, and what I hope you all leave here with, whether you think this is a good idea or a bad idea or you're indifferent to it, is that the opportunity that we have for risks in NCCI states to bring clarity to this chaos, to show them what's going to happen before it happens, is tremendous. To be able to talk to them about how these changes are going to happen, even if you can't explain to them exactly what it means to them, getting out in front of it. I've talked to their agents here or who work in Missouri and are from Missouri, who just got the ERA the middle of this year, and the misinformation and lack of knowledge of that has presented a tremendous opportunity. And the reality is, again, that for employers who are doing the right things, who implement this process, their opportunities to get better, the threshold for where they can get to is going down. And that is an opportunity for all of us. Preston?
Any other questions? I guess what I'd like to do, Kevin, is let's everybody thank Kevin for what he's done in experience mods. And, Kevin has analyzed more than 100 experience mods so far this year, mod worksheets, and has helped numerous advisors on behalf of the Institute and you all. Thank you, Kevin, for your work. Now you're adjourned to go home.
Right.
No, he isn't.